Good evening, and welcome to a special episode of عنان podcast, shot here live during the Miss Global Forum 2024. I'm very pleased to introduce my next guest for the session. With me, I have Loغان, who is the youngest consultant at UNICEF and is a youth and education advocate. Welcome, Aliyah.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you here. You were telling me it's your first time in the kingdom.
First time in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and I'm having the most fantastic time ever. It's such a beautiful country, and it really exceeded my expectations on everything. So yeah. Having a blast.
Did it break any stereotypes that you
For sure.
may have had?
I didn't have any stereotypes, which was good. I feel like I came into this with a really positive mindset, and it just exceeded the mindset that I already had, the expectations.
Excellent.
So it's been fantastic.
I'm very glad to hear that.
Yeah.
So, Aliyah, you're dedicating your life, I would say, and your passion towards advocating for youth and for education.
Absolutely.
So tell me a little bit about that journey. How did that start for you?
Yeah, this is such a great question. I love going down like memory lane
Nice.
on work that I've been able to do. But I initially started, so I'm from New York City in the United States, and I noticed how the high school education system in New York specifically wasn't the most pleasing or it wasn't the best environment for all students. And I think I looked at New York City, and then I went statewide and then went countrywide, and I realized that from different programs that I was able to engage with young people around the world, that education was something that everyone was being impacted by, especially lack of access to education or inequitable education. So I found that it was something that I wanted to improve and change. And then I realized, I took another step on that and realized that girls have a specific situation where they either don't have access to education or may not have the same resources when it comes to their education and pursuing higher education. So I really wanted to change that. And in 2021, I got really involved in UNICEF. I worked with UNICEF in Ashanti, which is UNICEF's research hub in Florence, Italy. And that's where I met my current boss, and I'm on the gender specialist team now. And it's been such an honor. I oversee the Global Girl Leaders Advisory Group, and that's UNICEF's first ever advisory group dedicated to gender equality and girls' rights. And it's girls from around the world who are really passionate about what they do. So to be able to be in spaces like this, and even the Miss Forum, is something that I never take for granted. It's something I value so much, because every young person that I meet, regardless of what they're advocating for, if it's gender equality or education, or it's to improve the climate, I think their stories and experiences always teach me another lesson on the importance of meeting people from around the world and like having strong conversations, even ones like these.
Oh, that's incredible. Thank you so much for that. So you mentioned that this all started with you noticing the variances in the quality of education.
Yeah.
How did you notice that? Like, what were the initial steps what were the initial insights that you had into that?
Great question. I think what I noticed specifically in New York, and I took this not only on a local scale, but then scaled it on a global scale. I noticed that not everyone had access to the same resources, especially when it came to...
How did you notice that?
Yeah, I think I just started having conversations, and I think that's like the foundation of my work.
Nice.
Conversations with people can always change a perspective that you have on anything. And I always say this with people around the world, whether it's global issues that people are facing, or even stereotypes. When you have conversations with people, you really expose yourselves to such different experiences and points of view that you may not have been able to understand if you kept yourself in your own bubble with people who only look like you or from the same country and same experiences. So from having conversations, I noticed that people didn't have the same access to resources depending on their zip code or even what state they were in. And then I took that a step further in understanding how we can advocate for girls' education holistically. I think one of the comments that I got towards the beginning of like my advocacy when I was younger, especially in like 2020, was the United States.
How old were you?
I was I think I was like 16 when I first started. I'm 22 now.
Okay.
I'm trying to do the math. 2020, maybe I was like 18 at that time.
Okay.
I need to.
You were in your teenage years.
Yeah, teenage years. Out of my adolescence.
Yeah.
So about 18, I think one of the comments that I usually got was like, the United States, there's a perception that because it's such a high income country, and because it has such a high GDP, that the education is perfect, which is not the case, and it's not always true.
It varies per state.
Exactly. It varies. And so I took that mentality through the work that I do internationally is that we have to look at education holistically. So looking at it holistically on a global scale, how can we improve education for all young people everywhere? On a country scale, how can we improve education in an individual country? And even on a local scale, I think some people underestimate the fact that, you know, many young girls, especially in remote villages, remote regions in a specific country, might not have the same experiences as another young girl who maybe has a higher socioeconomic status and is living in a major city. So that is really important to me, to look at education holistically and really value the work of everyone.
No, I love that. And I think, you know, I'm going to keep coming back to the hows, because I really am into the practical advice that we can come out of your experience. I think you mentioned that you found this gap, you found the variances. How did you move from that to global? Do you know what I mean? You have this in your teenage years. How did you move from that to working with international organizations, to impacting not just locally, but regionally and globally?
Great question. I think for me, I've always loved having conversations with people. And I think I will always come back to that. And every question you ask probably in this podcast is conversations and like meeting people where they're at. So I, went to different conferences where I met people who worked at the United Nations. And then I was so interested in it. I was like, I'm not going to let this contact go. And I want to continue to engage and see what ways that I could be involved in different teams and how can I support them? And then how could they also support me in my professional development and in my career? So I think,
at such a young age, that's what you were thinking.
Yeah, I was thinking about that.
How did you have that clarity of thought at such a young age?
That's a great question. I keep saying that's a great question because these are all fantastic. I think for me, maybe it was the way I was raised on like thinking ahead and planning for the future, but also living in the moment. And I think one of the most important things that I value in life is like, not only conversations, but like these, intimate conversations that I have with people and friendships that I have with young people from around the world who do such fantastic work.
So you were exposed to international organizations through conferences from an early age.
Yeah.
And that exposure came through schools or through your parents, or was it your curiosity?
Through programming. Curiosity. So I was able to find different programmings. And then
so you went looking for them?
Yeah, I went looking for them on my own accord. I went looking for them, and it was really helpful because then I was, it was answering so many questions that I had about the world and like different people. Everyone has ideas of different groups of people or even stereotypes, but when you have conversations with people from around the world, you realize there's so many more similarities than differences.
Right.
And I have conversations even within like the Global Girl Leaders Advisory Group with UNICEF. Not everyone speaks the same language. We're not from the same country, not even the same racial groups, but we all have this common and shared idea of advocacy for girls' rights, which I think is so important and is so needed in life. And I always say this, if you're like the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. Yes. So I never think I'm the smartest in the room, and I truly never am, because there's always more to learn. And I think for me, with friendships and having people from not only around the world, but even within the United States that I've been able to have the honor of calling my friends, they always teach me so much about life, whether it's solving world issues or having a positive mentality. Those stories and really interpersonal relationships and conversations really fuel my work and my life ultimately.
Incredible. So tell me a little bit about the work that you do for the girls' advocacy.
Yeah.
What you mentioned that it's a diverse group of people, different cultures, different languages. What is the work? How are you advocating for girls?
Great question. So essentially the way the Global Girl Leaders Advisory Group works is we help support the gender specialist team and UNICEF as a whole when it comes to, figuring out how to engage with young girls in this new age. Mm-hmm. I think it is very interesting now. There's a lot of the world has become very digital. So we're figuring out how can we engage with girls in programming. And this is
in rural communities?
Yeah, so rural communities, I think that is a little different because I think usually if there is, for example, we did a survey when we surveyed girls to get an understanding of their perspectives on how they see gender equality, how they see their rights, and where they see the world going in the next couple of years. And one of the things that we had to tackle is how do we access rural girls when it comes to these surveys? If they don't have access to Wi-Fi, if they may not have electricity, they won't be able to take an online survey that is we're promoting on Instagram or different social media apps. So I think a lot of my work, especially with UNICEF and even outside of UNICEF, UNICEF is figuring out how to meet people where they're at. How do we engage with people from around the world who have different perspectives in a way that is based in equity and based in supporting them? So I've been trying to figure that out, and I think step by step we're getting closer to really accomplishing our goals when it comes to gender equality and especially access to education. And it includes so many different things on a local and global scale when it comes to education, on how we can, individually do our parts, but as a world, ensure that there's infrastructure for schools, ensures that girls have safe bathrooms, there's menstrual hygiene products for girls.
And this is all funded through UNICEF.
Yes, and this is sort of, in those specific comments were the theoretical of like what we want to accomplish in this world, what we would want to solve. I specifically have been able to support with reports and different surveys and speaking on behalf of UNICEF at various events on the urgency of investing in girls' education. And it's really interesting, a lot of times when I'm meeting with world leaders or stakeholders and even philanthropists, I always ask them the question, what would you change about your education? And that so changes the dynamic of the conversation. So it's not like a young person talking to a person with power.
Yeah.
It's just two students having a conversation on how can we improve education, your experience.
Yeah.
So it changes the game, and it's a really nice, opportunity to hear from another person's perspective on what they would change about their education, and that gets them going on how can we invest in girls' education. And the fact,
so is it more about what would you change in terms of the accessibility of education, or are we talking about the way in which we're teaching teaching students?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both. I think typically I ask that question to get on a personal level with people to see that, education is something that is always changing and growing. It's not like it's a given that if you adapt it for one time, you can keep it the same way for 50 years.
It's evolving.
It's evolving. And now with advanced technology, AI, and other digital resources, it's evolving even faster, but it's also leaving so many people behind with the technology gap. So I think it's kind of the latter. It's really important to, one, meet people where they're at and have those conversations, but two, it's important to think about how can we actually change education for girls. And like you said, it's about curriculum. It's about ensuring that we're engaging and we're giving them resources and having leadership programs, and even thinking about higher education to make sure that girls have opportunities and they think they have a career path in the future.
It's interesting that you brought up higher education, because with the trajectory of current trends in technology, I think it's more about skill than education in the institutional form. So I think it's really powerful what you guys are doing, and especially if you break it down and make it more accessible, utilizing the technologies that we have, ensuring connectivity. And it's a huge ask.
Yeah, it is huge.
It's a huge
but it's
ask,
needed.
but it's
very
much needed.
And I think the most important thing within that is giving girls the option. And I think that is something that, unfortunately, is being taken away from so many young girls around the world.
Right.
They don't have the option. So whether it's they want to go into work right after school, or if they want to go into higher education, or they want to just, be married and have children. Whatever it is, it's important that young girls have the freedom to choose and have the autonomy to figure out what they want to do in their career and their life. And I think for us, it's not about telling girls, well, you have to go to higher education.
But giving them the options.
Giving them the option and the freedom to decide on their own what they would want to pursue.
So it seems like as much as it's rewarding work, it can seem a bit daunting as well.
It definitely can.
How do you overcome the challenges that come with it?
That's a great question. I think it's a difficult one. That's $1 billion question, actually, because I'm still trying to figure it out on how to overcome it. I will say, I think in my personal life, I have such great friends and I have such a supportive family that I think when I'm having a hard time disconnecting from the work that I'm doing, they make it so much easier. And I think I appreciate that so much, not only their support, but their joy and laughter that they bring to my life. I think they are the most fantastic people. And I always say this, but I genuinely believe I've met the smartest, greatest, and kindest people ever within my friend group, especially. So I think that's one of the ways that I tackle that. And I think another way is through mentorship. I have great mentors, whether they're from UNICEF or from other UN agencies or other older people that I've met. They've really instilled in me such strong values on knowing that you can't solve one issue alone, and you have to figure out what works for you, but use a community to be able to solve an issue.
The power of the collective.
Exactly.
So
and that's beautiful.
That's actually a thematic area that's come up quite a bit in my conversations over the past 2 days. Everyone's stressing the importance of community, and I think it's a beautiful thing to hear, and it's refreshing, because a lot of the times when you speak to people, it's like I statements, a lot of I's. Yeah, right? I believe this. I want to solve this. So it's like I take time to reflect and meditate, which is fine. Yeah. But also I love that the collective, the community is coming back as a thing, right? Yeah. Where and there's so much weight and importance to that.
So much importance.
So I'm very glad that you brought that up. Yeah. So that's in the physical space. Your community exists in the physical space. There's also your online community.
Absolutely.
Tell me a little bit about that. Yeah, tell me a little bit about that, and how you use, or if you use, that space to propel your advocacy forward.
Absolutely. I think social media, it's a very interesting dichotomy between it being very positive and being great for you, and then also the negative sides of anything. Right. And anything that you do too much of can have a negative impact on you. Me personally, I think that I've had a really great time connecting with people internationally. And I think using social media and using the digital world makes it so much easier to connect with people. And it's so interesting because of...
And you find the same kind of people.
I find the same kind of people. I think I'm always attracting them. Always. Nice. So it's been nice to be able to connect with people, and another way to do that is staying engaged with them through social media. So I have friends from Australia, from 8 different parts of Asia, different parts of Africa, and it's completely different time zones, but we still are able to connect with each other and see what we're up to, supporting each other in both our fields and our works and our advocacy efforts. So that's been really helpful. And then of course on the other side of that, if I'm a person, I don't know about you and people watching, but I scroll way too much on TikTok. Yes. And it's become a habit. It's become a really bad habit.
So I'm not the biggest TikToker. Yeah. I'm a millennial, so makes sense.
You look Gen Z.
Thanks. Thanks. I don't think so, but thank you. So I keep downloading it and then deleting it. I'm like, what is this TikTok anyways?
Fair. I can't delete it. It's one night I was actually sleeping but scrolling. Yeah. And I didn't have my phone in my hand. I was just scrolling.
No way.
Yeah, it's an addiction, unfortunately.
That's pretty crazy. No, and I think we all, we've all spoken about the positives and the negative parts of social media, but I think in the work that you do, having that global community of people who think alike, who are after changing the world in the way that you are, I think it's extremely powerful tool.
Extremely powerful, and it's interesting you brought that up, because I had a question. I was on a panel earlier today, and one of the questions is, what are the challenges that I face? And my immediate response is that I'm in a bubble where everyone thinks that girls deserve rights, girls should be educated. They agree with all the policies I'm saying. We agree relatively on everything related to human rights and all the advocacy work I have been able to do. But not everyone does.
Right.
And that Absolutely. Is the difficult part of this, is you create a digital space or a physical space, but not everyone in the world would agree with that, or even agree with the methods or steps or procedures you're taking to solve that goal. So I think that's one of the biggest challenges that I've noticed, is how do I break my echo chamber and really have conversations with people to convince them of the importance of investing in education. And I find that one of the ways to do so is talking about or discussing how if you invest in a girl's education, you're actually investing in a country's GDP and overall the world's GDP.
I mean, it seems like a logical argument.
Seems like a logical argument. It's unfortunate that you have to put a price tag towards it, but it's the world we live in.
Yeah, it's the way the world operates. Yeah. You're absolutely right. Throughout your work, has there ever been a moment in which it felt intimidating to a certain extent?
I think so. I think especially when I was younger, it was very difficult. And I think it's very important to have, different groups of people, especially with younger and older groups of people in one space. But I think it can be very intergenerational. Exactly. Thank you. I couldn't find the word. It was on the tip of my tongue. But I think that is something that's very important, but it can be very intimidating to have that. And I think there's a lot of pressure to have a degree and to, have studied XYZ and study this topic for 10 years. And for many girl leaders like myself, we're either in college or just starting college or things of that nature. So it can be difficult if you don't have all of the accolades when it comes to in academics. And I think that's something that has been, the most challenging. But for me now, I have such a supportive group of people, varied in age, who understand that, you don't have to have a specific degree to advocate for anything. Right. And I think that's what's, Gen Z and a lot of young people have been changing the game on, is like, we can be experts in all of these things with our experiences without having or being fully completed with our education just yet.
So how would you do that? Like if you were a young person starting out in the advocacy field, you are a young person, but if you were just starting out, what advice would you have given yourself at this point?
Great question. I think I would say, start small. Figure out something that, you want to solve, whether it's through advocacy, through entrepreneurship, whatever, route you want to take. I would say start small. And the reason why I say start small and start local is so many of the experiences that I've had and the lessons that I've learned has been from people who have done local work. And I've learned from them and had such great experiences, hearing their stories of what they've done locally to solve a very specific issue that only their village or remote region of the world is facing. Right. So I think that would be my main advice. And, to seek mentorship. And my advice also to older people is to be mentors. I wouldn't be talking here to you or even be in Saudi Arabia, in the kingdom of Saudi Arabia, if I didn't have mentors who invested in me and said, I believe in you. I think you're smart. I think you're worth it. I think you deserve to be in this space. If my mentors didn't really invest in me in that way, who's to say I would be sitting here? Right. So I think that's, my biggest advice for older people watching is reply to an email. If a young person reaches out to you and says, hey, I'm looking for an internship, I'm looking for a fellowship, whatever the case may be, reach out to them, give them support, give them guidance. I think a lot of young people need guidance and need support in those aspects, but that would be my advice for both groups of people.
I love that. No, thank you. So thank you so much for giving that advice to the leaders as well, and for people who are in a space to give back, right? Why not take that opportunity?
Why not? It's so important in life to give back and to spread positivity. The world needs it.
Yeah, for sure.
For sure. It's very important.
What do you hope for the future of advocacy?
I would hope for the future of advocacy, I would hope that we wouldn't need to have such institutions to solve issues. I would hope that we've accomplished so much as like the human race, essentially, where many of the issues that can be solved is solved. And I think that's like my hope for it. And I think the second thing is that advocacy, I hope to see when my generation, as we get older and as we get leadership positions as well, is people there who care deeply about human rights and not about, monetary gain or other like external factors, but more so focusing on the importance of promoting human rights around the world.
I love that.
Yeah.
How do you remain so hopeful?
I don't know. I think it's just me.
Yeah, I think it's just you. I love that.
Me.
And I love your energy.
I appreciate
and I love
that
conversing
so much.
with you.
This was so fantastic. This was the highlight of the conference. This conference was absolutely fantastic, and this is a highlight of being here.
Thank you so much. I loved having you as a guest, and I look forward to seeing where your career trajectory takes you.
I appreciate that so much. I'll stay posted on everything.
I can only see it going up and beyond.
I should say inshallah.
Inshallah,
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Inshallah, God willing. Thank you so much
for
for being here.
Thank you.
Bye.